Welcome to the Answer Studio. Today I'll be showing you how to create this half circle arch backdrop with deep greenery accents. And it all starts with my favorite balloon color scheme. I'm using our brand new large balloon kit in the color Wildflower. To start off, inflate all of the 11 and 17-inch balloons so that they're nice and round and tie them into pairs. Take two of these pairs and overlap them so that the nozzles touch in the center, and then twist one balloon from each of those pairs around each other, locking them into a quad. Create at least one quad and one cluster of 6 in every color. To make a cluster of 6, first tie two of them into a quad and then bring in a third pair, slip it in so that the nozzle of that pair is touching the nozzles of the quad, and then twist one of the balloons from the pair around one of the other balloons, and that will create your cluster of 6. I'm building today's design on a 6.5-foot circle backdrop stand, and we're going to start adding balloons at the bottom. Take your first cluster of 6 and pick a small balloon in that cluster and press it underneath the hoop so that one balloon is above the bar and one balloon is below the bar, and we're going to twist those two balloons around each other, capturing that bar in between them. Now I'm going to grab a quad and nestle it right up against my cluster and attach it to the circle arch in the exact same way by twisting those two balloons around the bar. And then I want to snug these nice and close together so I don't have any big gaps. For this design, I'm using a color block method, so I'm going to switch to a new color and alternate how many clusters and quads I'm adding in each of those colors so I get a bit of an organic look. Some clusters will be really small, like this gold one. I'm just going to add one cluster of 6. But my next color, Sangria, I'm going to add multiple clusters of 6 for a bigger section. The variation in amounts of color will give us that beautiful random look that helps it look organic in nature. I'm going to be covering just over half of the circle arch in these balloon clusters. So once I get to the top, I'm going to move back down to the bottom and add one more cluster to the left side, giving it that beautiful moon shape. Next, I'm going to flare out the base of my design by creating a skirt using some more of these clusters. So I'm going to take an empty 260 balloon and tie it to the nozzles of one of my clusters by pinching the end of that balloon to one of the nozzles and then wrapping it in figure 8 a couple times around those balloons to secure it in place. Then I'm going to grab another cluster and nestle it right up against the one that I had just attached the 260 balloon to, stretch that 260 through the center of the new balloon cluster and wrap it in a figure 8 around a couple of those balloons, and that will hold these two together. Now I'm going to take this piece that I've just created and attach it to the side of the circle arch. Nestle it right up against the balloons that are just starting to curve upwards and stretch that same 260 that's attached to the clusters around one or two balloons that are already attached to that circle arch, and then go back and wrap the tail end of it around some of the balloons in the cluster, and that will secure the two of them together. Now you can play around with these balloons to get them nestled nice and close and sitting exactly how you want. Then I'm going to take a couple more sets of balloons, tie them together, and tie them to the front side of the arch using another 260 balloon. The key here is to make sure that as you tie these new clusters on, they're nice and snug to the balloons that are already on the circle frame. That will make it look like one cohesive piece. I'm going to add a couple more clusters on top of these two so they kind of create a triangular shape right at the corner of our circle arch. To give this design a little bit more visual interest and texture, I'm going to inflate 5-inch balloons to 4.5 inches in diameter or 4 pumps with a hand pump. I'm going to inflate my first one and tuck it under one of my fingers that's holding the hand pump while I inflate a second one to the exact same size, and then I can tie them into a pair by wrapping the nozzle around twice and tying it in a simple knot. This keeps me from having to tie lots of extra knots. Now once I've got a bunch of these inflated and tied into pairs, I'm then going to tie them into quads just like we did earlier with our bigger balloons by twisting them around each other. To each of these quads, I'm going to add a rubber band right over one of the balloons so that it sits against the nozzles of that quad. This will make it super easy to attach to our circle arch. So find any gap where you want to place your quad and then look for a balloon right next to it. Stretch the rubber band around that balloon until it's touching the nozzles and hidden from sight, and then you can play around with the placement of those smaller balloons until they're sitting exactly where you want them. I like to place these little balloons anywhere where I have gaps in my design, anywhere I think I need a little bit more texture, or in places I want to elongate and blend my color blocks together. Once you're happy with the placement of all the balloons, it's time to add in the greenery. I'm using 2 different types of eucalyptus garlands, and I'm going to layer them together, making sure the branches point upwards so they want to flare out naturally. Now I'm going to attach these to the circle arch using a zip tie. So I'm going to place them on the front side of the arch and then wrap the zip tie around those 2 garlands and the arch frame, and then pull the zip tie nice and tight. Press the ends of the garlands as well as the zip tie between the nearest balloons so you can't see where the greenery begins. Then I'm going to take one of those greenery garlands and start wrapping it around the arch frame, making sure I'm freeing any of the leaves or branches that might be caught between the main strand of garland and the frame. Once I've got to the end of that garland, I'm going to take the second garland and wrap it in the opposite direction so that it fills in the holes that the first garland left. At the ends of those first garlands, you're going to take 2 more garlands and overlap their start and tie all 4 of those garlands to the frame using another zip tie. Then I'm going to continue to wrap the garlands in opposite directions all the way down until I get to the balloons at the base. At this point, I'm going to take any remaining garland and wrap it in between some of the balloons so the tail ends of the garlands are hidden from sight. Now I want to bring those greenery elements onto the rest of the balloon arch so there's not a harsh contrast between the 2 sides. I'm inserting these greenery stems between balloons around the entire arch and using the tension between the balloons to hold those greenery pieces in place. I wanted to evenly distribute the greenery pieces across the arch so that some of them were placed in deep crevices between balloons and some of them were spraying out away from the balloons, giving more volume and texture and kind of mimicking how the greenery on the left side of the garland was looking. If you'd also like to make today's design, everything I used in this video is linked in the description box below. And until the next time, remember, stay creative, everybody!